In the bustling heart of Chicago, Evelyn Carlyle, a widow of wealth and grace, finds her world shattered when a simple lunch ends in public humiliation. With her reputation tarnished, she is rescued not by her social circle, but by Leo Tanner, a once successful architect, now living on the streets. His unexpected kindness sparks a journey that will intertwine their fates in ways neither could have imagined. As they work together to build a community center for those in need, they uncover secrets that threaten to tear them apart. In a world where their pasts collide and the future hangs in the balance, can they find redemption and forgiveness, or will the echoes of their choices haunt them forever? The gentle clinking of fine china and the murmur of hushed conversations filled the air of Le Claire, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Evelyn Carlyle, dressed in an elegantly tailored gray suit, sat alone at her favorite corner table, gazing out the window at the bustling street below. Her silver-gray hair was pinned neatly into a chignon, and a string of pearls, her late husband's final gift, rested lightly against her collarbone. The world outside moved quickly, but inside, Evelyn was lost in memories. The waiter arrived with the bill, placing it discreetly on the table beside her dessert plate. She barely noticed, still deep in thought about the life she'd once shared with Robert. Finally, she reached for her purse, but as she opened it, panic set in. Her wallet was not there. Frantically, Evelyn searched through her bag, but it was no use. She had left her wallet on the mahogany table in her study. For a moment, she froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been in such a situation before, and the mere thought of it filled her with dread. She motioned for the waiter. "Yes, ma'am," the young man asked, his tone polite but impersonal. "I'm terribly sorry, but I seem to have left my wallet at home," Evelyn explained, trying to maintain her composure. "If you could please allow me to send someone to settle the bill later today." The waiter's expression hardened. "I'm afraid that's not possible, ma'am. If you can't pay, you'll need to leave." "Please, I'm a regular here," Evelyn insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "I can bring the money later, I promise." The waiter didn't seem moved. "I'm sorry, but those are the rules. If you can't pay, I'll have to ask you to leave now." Evelyn felt a flush of humiliation rise in her cheeks as the restaurant manager, noticing the commotion, approached the table. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, his tone clipped and businesslike. "This lady can't pay her bill," the waiter explained. "Please," Evelyn began, but the manager cut her off. "If you can't pay, you'll have to leave," he said firmly, his eyes narrowing. "We can't make exceptions, not even for regular customers." The indignity of the situation overwhelmed her. Evelyn's hands shook as she stood, gathering her belongings. She glanced around, meeting the disapproving and curious eyes of the other patrons. Without another word, she hurried out of the restaurant, the shame weighing heavily on her shoulders. Outside, the cold autumn wind whipped through the streets, but Evelyn barely noticed as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Her thoughts were a chaotic jumble of embarrassment, anger, and helplessness. How had she, Evelyn Carlyle, once the wife of one of Chicago's most respected men, come to be publicly humiliated like this? She stood there, unsure of what to do next. Returning home without settling the bill felt wrong, but the idea of walking back into that restaurant was unthinkable. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Evelyn looked up to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall and lean, his clothes worn, and his brown hair flecked with gray. His hazel eyes held a mix of concern and something else she couldn't quite place. Yes, I'm fine," Evelyn replied automatically, though she knew it was a lie. The man took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "Forgive me, but I saw what happened back there. I know it's not my place, but would you allow me to help?" Evelyn blinked, surprised by the offer. "Help? But how?" The man hesitated for a moment before pulling out a small, weathered leather pouch. He opened it to reveal a handful of coins, clearly all he had. "I don't have much, but it might be enough to cover your bill." Tears pricked the corners of Evelyn's eyes as she realized what he was offering. This man, who clearly had little to his name, was willing to give her everything he had. "I can't accept that," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Please, he insisted, his tone gentle but firm. Sometimes we all need a little help. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded, her gratitude too overwhelming for words. The man turned and walked back into the restaurant. A few minutes later, he returned with the receipt, handing it to her with a small, kind smile. It's taken care of, he said simply. Evelyn took the receipt with trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please tell me your name. Leo, he replied. Leo Tanner. Leo, Evelyn repeated, committing the name to memory. I will repay you. Please, tell me how I can find you again. Leo shook his head. You don't need to repay me. Just take care of yourself, all right? With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Evelyn standing on the sidewalk, the receipt clutched tightly in her hand. She watched him go, a mix of emotions swirling within her, gratitude, shame, and a deep, unsettling sense of responsibility. Evelyn returned to her mansion, the grandeur of the place only amplifying the emptiness she felt inside. The opulent decor, the high ceilings, the marble floors, it all felt hollow, as if it belonged to someone else, someone who had lived a life she no longer recognized. She wandered through the house aimlessly, her thoughts returning again and again to Leo Tanner. Who was he? How had he ended up in such a dire situation? And why had he chosen to help her, a stranger, when he clearly had so little himself? Finally, Evelyn found herself in the study, the room where she had spent countless hours with Robert, discussing business, life, and everything in between. The room was filled with memories that now felt distant and out of reach. She sat down at the mahogany desk and opened the drawer, her fingers brushing against the leather wallet she had forgotten earlier that day. The sight of it filled her with a fresh wave of shame. How could she have been so careless? But more than that, she felt a deep sense of guilt. She had lived her life in comfort and privilege, blind to the struggles of those less fortunate. And yet, today, a man who had nothing had shown her more kindness than she had ever thought possible. Evelyn knew she couldn't simply go on as if nothing had happened. She had to do something to make amends, not just to Leo, but to herself. But what? How could she possibly repay the debt she now felt she owed? The answer came to her slowly, as she sat there in the quiet of the study. She had wealth, influence, and resources, things that Leo Tanner clearly lacked. But he had something she didn't, a strength born of hardship, a resilience that had allowed him to survive when others might have given up. Perhaps, Evelyn thought, she could use what she had to help him rebuild what he had lost. It wasn't about charity. It was about restoring dignity. And perhaps, in doing so, she could find some measure of redemption for herself. The next morning, Evelyn awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. She dressed quickly, choosing a simple outfit that would allow her to move through the city without drawing too much attention. She had only one goal in mind, to find Leo Tanner. She returned to the area near the restaurant, her eyes scanning the streets for any sign of him. It took some time, but finally, she spotted him sitting on a bench near a 24-hour diner, his posture slumped, his gaze fixed on the ground. Evelyn approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. Leo, she called softly. He looked up, surprised to see her. Mrs. Carlyle, he said, standing up. What are you doing here? I came to find you, Evelyn replied. There's something I need to discuss with you. Leo frowned, clearly puzzled. Discuss with me? About what? Evelyn took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I want to help you, Leo. Not with money, but with an opportunity. I have a project in mind, something I've been thinking about for a long time. A community center, a place where people in need can find support, education, and a chance to rebuild their lives. Leo's frown deepened. And what does that have to do with me? I want you to design it, Evelyn said simply. You were an architect, weren't you? Leo hesitated, clearly taken aback by the offer. I was, he admitted. But that was a long time ago. I'm not sure I'm the right person for the job. I think you are, Evelyn insisted. You have the experience, the knowledge, and most importantly, the understanding of what it means to need a second chance. Leo looked at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Why would you want to do this? Because you helped me when I needed it, Evelyn replied. And because I believe that together, We can create something that will help others. Will you at least consider it? For a long moment, Leo said nothing, his gaze distant as he weighed her words. Finally, he nodded, a small, tentative smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I'll consider it, he agreed. Evelyn smiled, relief washing over her. Thank you, Leo. I believe this could be the start of something important for both of us. As they stood there, the autumn wind swirling around them, Evelyn felt a spark of hope, a hope that this partnership might be exactly what they both needed to find their way forward. The coffee shop was a small, cozy place tucked away on a quiet street near the community center construction site. The warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Evelyn Carlisle and Leo Tanner sat across from each other at a small wooden table. The contrast between them was stark. Evelyn, with her polished appearance and elegant demeanor, and Leo, with his weathered clothes and cautious eyes. So, Evelyn began, breaking the silence. I've been thinking about the community center's design. I envision a place that feels welcoming, open, and accessible to everyone. A space where people can come and feel safe, where they can find the resources they need to rebuild their lives. Leo nodded slowly, his mind already at work. We'll need to maximize natural light, he said thoughtfully. Large windows, open spaces. It should feel warm and inviting, not institutional. Exactly, Evelyn agreed, a small smile playing on her lips. I knew you would understand. Leo leaned back in his chair, studying her. Why are you doing this, Mrs. Carlisle? I mean, really? You could hire any architect in the city. Why take a chance on someone like me? Evelyn met his gaze, her expression sincere. Because I believe in second chances, Leo. And because I see something in you, something that was lost but not gone. I want to help you find it again. This project, it's not just about the building. It's about giving people hope, dignity, and a chance to start over. Leo considered her words, a flicker of something. Hope perhaps igniting within him. All right, he said after a moment. Let's do it. But I want to be clear, I'm not looking for charity. I want to earn my way back. Evelyn smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. I wouldn't have it any other way. As they continued to discuss the details of the project, a tentative trust began to form between them. They were unlikely allies, brought together by circumstance, but united by a shared vision of what this community center could become. The walls that had initially separated them, walls of class, experience, and circumstance, were slowly beginning to crumble. Later that evening, Leo returned to his makeshift shelter, a small, secluded spot in an alleyway, where he kept what little he owned. The day's conversation with Evelyn had stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. He sat down on the worn blanket that served as his bed and pulled out a small, battered notebook from his bag. It was the only possession he had managed to keep from his old life, a notebook filled with sketches and ideas, the remnants of dreams that had once seemed within reach. As he flipped through the pages, Leo's thoughts drifted back to the life he had lost. He had been a different man then, confident, ambitious, and driven. He had worked tirelessly to build a successful career, only to see it all crumble in an instant, the victim of a scandal that had nothing to do with him, but had ruined him nonetheless. He remembered the day it all fell apart, the day he was escorted out of his office, his colleagues avoiding his gaze as if he were a criminal. The shame, the anger, the disbelief, it had all consumed him, leaving him a broken man, struggling to survive on the streets. But now, for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. The project Evelyn had offered him was more than just a job. It was a chance to reclaim his dignity, to prove to himself and the world that he was still capable, still worthy. But the fear lingered, the fear that he might fail, that he might disappoint her, that he wasn't the man he used to be. The past weighed heavily on him, and he knew that moving forward would require facing it head-on. He closed the notebook and set it aside, lying back on the blanket and staring up at the night sky. The stars were faint against the city lights, but they were there, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of light. The next day, Leo and Evelyn stood at the empty lot where the community center would soon begin to take shape. The site was a stark contrast to the surrounding area, a barren patch of land amidst a neighborhood that had seen better days. But to Leo, it was a blank canvas, full of potential. First, we'll need to level the ground, Leo said, surveying the site with a critical eye. Then we can start laying the foundation. I've sketched out some initial ideas for the layout. I'll show them to you later. Evelyn nodded, her eyes following his gaze. I'll start reaching out to the city council for the necessary permits. We'll also need to secure funding. I have some contacts who might be willing to invest in the project. Leo looked at her, a hint of concern in his eyes. This isn't going to be easy, you know. There will be setbacks, delays, people who don't want to see this project succeed. I'm aware, Evelyn replied, her tone resolute. But I'm not afraid of challenges, Leo. We'll face them together. Leo couldn't help but admire her determination. He had seen many people like Evelyn in his past life, wealthy, powerful, and disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. But Evelyn was different. She was willing to get her hands dirty, to fight for something she believed in. As they discussed the next steps, the first construction crew arrived, ready to begin the initial groundwork. The noise of machinery filled the air, a stark contrast to the quiet determination that had settled between Evelyn and Leo. For the first time in a long while, Leo felt a sense of purpose. This project wasn't just about building a structure. It was about building something that could last, something that could make a real difference in people's lives. As the day wore on, they encountered their first challenge, an issue with the permits. The city council had raised concerns about the project, citing potential zoning issues. It was a setback, but Evelyn refused to be discouraged. We'll meet with them, she said firmly. We'll explain the importance of this project and how it will benefit the community. They'll come around. Leo admired her optimism, but he knew the reality of dealing with bureaucracy. Still, he appreciated her willingness to fight for the project. It gave him hope that they could overcome whatever obstacles lay ahead. That evening, Evelyn invited Leo to her mansion for dinner. She felt that it was important to continue building their partnership, not just professionally, but personally as well. The mansion, with its ivy-covered stone walls and grand interiors, was a world away from the streets where Leo had spent the last few years. Leo was hesitant at first, feeling out of place in such an opulent setting. But Evelyn welcomed him warmly, leading him to a cozy dining room where a simple but elegant meal had been prepared. "Please, make yourself at home," Evelyn said, gesturing for him to sit. "I know this is a far cry from what you're used to, but I wanted us to have a chance to talk away from the project." Leo sat down, still feeling a bit uneasy. "This is more than I'm used to, that's for sure," he admitted with a small smile. "But thank you. It's kind of you." As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than Leo had expected. They talked about the project, of course, but also about their pasts. Evelyn shared stories of her late husband, Robert, and the life they had built together. She spoke of the challenges she had faced in taking over his business after his death, and the loneliness that had followed. "I never imagined I would be running a business," Evelyn confessed, her voice tinged with sadness. "But after Robert passed, I didn't have much choice. I had to keep things going, for the sake of the employees, the clients." "I understand," Leo said, nodding. "When I lost my job, it felt like I lost everything. My career, my home, my purpose. It's hard to find your way back from that." Evelyn looked at him, her expression softening. "But you are finding your way back, Leo. This project, it's just the beginning. I can see that you still have so much to offer, so much potential." Leo was silent for a moment, processing her words. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but it's hard to believe in myself after everything that's happened." "You don't have to do it alone," Evelyn said gently. "We'll face this together, one step at a time." Leo looked at her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about the bond that was forming between them. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had someone in his corner, someone who believed in him. As the evening drew to a close, Evelyn walked Leo to the door. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said with a smile. "I think we're going to do great things together." "Thank you for inviting me," Leo replied, returning the smile, "and for believing in me." As Leo left the mansion and walked back into the cool night air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The project was daunting, and the challenges were many, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, and that, he realized, was worth fighting for. The community center was beginning to take shape. The foundation had been laid, and the skeleton of the building was now visible against the skyline. Evelyn Carlisle and Leo Tanner stood side by side, watching as the construction crew worked diligently to bring their vision to life. The noise of hammers and saws filled the air, mingling with the distant sounds of the city. "It's really coming together," Evelyn said, a note of pride in her voice. "I can almost see it now, people coming here, finding hope, rebuilding their lives." Leo nodded, though his expression was more reserved. "There's still a lot to do," he said, his eyes scanning the site critically. "We've had some delays with the materials, and the budget is getting tight." Evelyn sighed, the weight of the project's challenges pressing down on her. "I know. I've been in touch with the suppliers, but everything seems to be moving slower than expected. And as for the budget, I've reached out to a few more potential donors, but we might need to make some cuts if the money doesn't come through." Leo frowned, considering their options. "We could scale back on some of the design elements, focus on what's essential. But I worry that if we start cutting corners, we'll lose the impact we're aiming for." "I agree," Evelyn said, her tone thoughtful. "We need to find a balance. Maybe there's another way to raise funds. An event, perhaps?" Leo's eyes brightened slightly at the idea. "A fundraiser could work. Something that brings people in, shows them what we're trying to achieve. If they can see the potential, they might be more willing to contribute." "Exactly," Evelyn replied, feeling a spark of optimism. "I'll start planning it. We'll need to make it special, something that resonates with people." As they continued to discuss the details, the tension between them began to ease. They were facing significant setbacks, but their shared commitment to the project was stronger than ever. The community center was more than just a building. It was a symbol of hope, both for the people it would serve and for Evelyn and Leo themselves. But as they worked to overcome the practical challenges, neither of them could foresee the emotional storm that was about to break. Late that night, Evelyn sat alone in her study, the room illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. The walls were lined with books and framed photographs, mementos of a life that now felt distant. She had been going through old financial records, hoping to find a way to allocate more funds to the community center without compromising her other obligations. As she flipped through the documents, a familiar name caught her eye: Greystone Developments. The name sent a shiver down her spine, bringing with it memories she had tried to bury. Greystone had been one of her late husband Robert's key investments, a company that had promised high returns but had eventually become embroiled in scandal. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she read through the reports, her heart sinking with each line. The more she read, the more she realized the connection between Greystone and Leo Tanner's downfall. It had been Greystone that had framed Leo, using him as a scapegoat to cover their own fraudulent activities. And it was Robert's firm that had backed Greystone, financing their operations and indirectly contributing to Leo's ruin. A wave of nausea washed over Evelyn as the full weight of the truth settled on her shoulders. She had unknowingly offered Leo a lifeline, only to discover that her husband had been partially responsible for the very circumstances that had destroyed his life. The irony was cruel, and the guilt overwhelming. She sat back in her chair, staring at the documents in disbelief. How could she face Leo now? How could she continue to work with him, knowing that her husband's actions had contributed to his suffering? The thought of telling him the truth filled her with dread, but the idea of keeping it from him felt even worse. Evelyn knew she had to make a choice: either confess the truth and risk destroying the trust they had built, or keep the secret and live with the burden of her guilt. The next morning, Evelyn found Leo at the construction site, overseeing the progress as usual. She approached him with trepidation, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent the night wrestling with her decision, and now, standing before him, she felt both fear and determination. "Leo, do you have a moment?" she asked, her voice betraying her anxiety. "Sure," Leo replied, turning to face her. "What's on your mind?" Evelyn hesitated, searching for the right words. There's something I need to tell you. Something I just discovered. Leo's expression grew serious as he sensed the gravity of her tone. What is it? Evelyn took a deep breath, steadying herself. I was going through some old financial records last night, and I found something troubling. It's about Greystone developments. The mention of Greystone caused Leo to stiffen, his eyes narrowing. Greystone, he repeated, his voice low. What about them? Leo, I didn't know this until now, but my husband's investment firm was one of Greystone's primary backers. Evelyn confessed, her voice trembling. Robert's firm financed their operations, including the projects that led to what happened to you. For a moment, Leo said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his face hardened, and his eyes filled with a mix of anger and betrayal. So, all this time, you knew? No, Evelyn said quickly, shaking her head. I swear I didn't know until last night. I would never have kept this from you if I had known. But you do know now, Leo said, his voice cold. And yet, you came here, offering me help, offering me a chance to rebuild my life. All while your husband's firm was responsible for tearing it apart. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes as she struggled to find the right words. Leo, I am so sorry. I can't change what happened, but I can try to make it right. I don't want to lose the trust we've built. I value our partnership, our friendship. Leo turned away, his hands clenched into fists. I don't know what to say, Evelyn. This changes everything. Please, Evelyn pleaded, stepping closer. Don't let this destroy what we've started. I believe in this project, in what it can do for the community, for you, for me, for everyone it touches. But Leo shook his head, his voice filled with pain. I need time to think. I can't just pretend this doesn't matter. Without another word, he walked away, leaving Evelyn standing alone in the midst of the construction site. The building that had once symbolized hope and new beginnings now felt like a monument to betrayal and broken trust. Days passed, and the construction of the community center stalled. Leo had not returned to the site since their confrontation, and Evelyn felt his absence keenly. The project that had once filled her with purpose now seemed to hang in the balance, and with it, her chance at redemption. Evelyn spent those days in a fog of guilt and uncertainty, unsure of how to move forward. She had tried calling Leo, but he hadn't answered. She had even gone to his usual spot near the diner, but he was nowhere to be found. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Evelyn returned to the construction site one evening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the skeletal framework of the building. She walked through the site, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. As she stood there, surrounded by the unfinished walls, Evelyn realized that she had a choice to make. She could abandon the project, let it fall apart in the wake of the truth that had been revealed, or she could fight to keep it alive, fight to rebuild the trust she had lost with Leo. She knew that the latter would not be easy. It would require humility, persistence, and a willingness to face her own flaws. But she also knew that if she didn't try, she would be left with nothing but regret. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn made her decision. She would find Leo, no matter how long it took, and she would do whatever it took to make things right. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future, one that included Leo, the community center, and the lives they had set out to change. With renewed determination, Evelyn left the construction site, her mind set on the difficult road ahead. She would not give up, not on the project and not on Leo. Because in the end, this wasn't just about redemption. It was about finding grace, even in the midst of their brokenness. The early morning light filtered through the trees as Evelyn made her way to the small park where Leo had often sought refuge. She had been searching for him for days, growing increasingly anxious with each passing hour. Now, as she approached the familiar spot near the fountain, she saw him sitting on a bench, his posture slumped, his gaze fixed on the ground. Leo, she called softly, hoping he wouldn't turn away. He looked up, his eyes tired and wary. Evelyn, he replied, his voice flat. Why are you here? Evelyn took a deep breath and sat down beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. I've been looking for you, she said quietly. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. but I couldn't just leave things the way they are. Leo didn't respond immediately, his gaze returning to the ground. Finally, he spoke, his tone laced with bitterness. You didn't have to come, Evelyn. I've been fine on my own before. I can be fine on my own again. I don't doubt that, Evelyn said, her voice steady. But I came because I want to make amends. I want to do more than just apologize. I want to show you that I'm committed to making things right. Leo glanced at her, skepticism clear in his eyes. And how do you plan to do that? Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, handing it to him. This is a proposal, she explained. I've spoken to my financial advisors, and I'm prepared to transfer a significant portion of my wealth into a charitable foundation in your name. The foundation will focus on helping people who have been wronged by the system, people who need a second chance just like you. Leo stared at the envelope, his expression unreadable. A foundation in my name? He repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. You really think that's going to fix everything? No, Evelyn admitted, her tone sincere. But it's a start. I can't undo what Robert's firm did, but I can try to make a difference going forward. I want to help others avoid the pain you've gone through, to give them the opportunities they deserve. Leo didn't say anything for a long moment. He simply sat there, the envelope unopened in his hand, as he weighed her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer, more contemplative. You really believe in this, don't you? I do, Evelyn replied. And I believe in you, Leo. You have so much to offer, and I want to help you use your talents to make a real impact. But I also know that I can't do this without your forgiveness. Leo sighed, his shoulders slumping. Forgiveness isn't easy, Evelyn. I'm not sure I'm ready to give it. I understand, she said gently. Take your time, but just know that I'm not giving up on this. Or on you. With that, she stood and began to walk away, giving him the space he needed to think. As she left the park, Evelyn felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty. She had made her gesture of atonement, but whether Leo would accept it, and her, was still uncertain. The construction site felt different without Leo's presence. The once vibrant atmosphere had dulled, the workers' spirits low as they continued their tasks with little enthusiasm. Evelyn visited the site every day, overseeing the progress and ensuring that things moved forward. But it was clear that something vital was missing. Then, one afternoon, as the sun began its descent behind the city's skyline, Evelyn noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the site. Leo was back, his expression guarded but resolute. Evelyn's heart lifted as she walked over to him. Leo, she greeted him, her voice full of relief. I'm glad you're here. He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the construction site. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, his tone measured. About the foundation, about the project, about everything. Evelyn waited, sensing that he had more to say. I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive everything that happened, Leo continued, his eyes meeting hers. But I also know that walking away from this project isn't the answer. This center, it's bigger than either of us. It's about helping people, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. And I want to be a part of that. Evelyn felt a wave of gratitude and respect for him. I'm so glad to hear that, Leo, she said earnestly. I've missed working with you. This project needs your vision, your expertise, and I need your partnership. Leo gave a small, almost reluctant smile. Let's get back to work then. With that, the two of them walked together onto the site, joining the workers who had paused to watch their interaction. As Leo began to give instructions, directing the next steps in the construction process, the atmosphere on the site seemed to brighten. The workers, inspired by his return, picked up their tools with renewed energy. As the day progressed, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose. Leo's return had reignited her passion for the project, and together, they began to address the challenges that had arisen during his absence. It wasn't easy. There were still delays, still budget concerns. But with Leo's expertise and Evelyn's determination, they made progress. That evening, as the last of the workers left the site, Evelyn and Leo stood together, surveying what they had accomplished. The walls of the community center were taking shape, the foundation strong and solid beneath their feet. We've come a long way, Evelyn said quietly, her gaze fixed on the structure before them. We have, Leo agreed. but there's still a lot of work to be done. And we'll do it, Evelyn replied, her tone firm. Together. A few days later, Evelyn invited Leo back to her mansion for another planning session. This time, the atmosphere was less formal, more comfortable. They had crossed a significant hurdle in their relationship, and while things weren't entirely back to normal, there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding between them. They sat in the study, papers and blueprints spread out on the table before them. Evelyn poured them each a cup of tea, the steam rising gently from the delicate porcelain cups. So, Evelyn began, taking a sip of her tea. I've been thinking about how we can make the community center even more impactful. We've talked about the basics, shelter, food, education, but what if we also offer job training? Something that can help people not just survive, but thrive. Leo nodded thoughtfully. That's a great idea. We could partner with local businesses to provide internships or apprenticeships. Give people real-world experience, something they can use to build a career. Exactly, Evelyn agreed. And what if we also created a mentorship program? People like you, who've been through difficult times and come out the other side, could mentor those who are just starting to rebuild. It would give them hope, show them that it's possible to turn their lives around. Leo's eyes lit up at the idea. I like that. It's not just about giving people a place to stay. It's about giving them a future. They spent the next few hours brainstorming ideas, sketching out plans, and discussing the logistics of implementing their new initiatives. The more they talked, the more their excitement grew. This was more than just a building. It was a movement, a chance to make a lasting impact on the community. As the evening wore on, Evelyn looked over at Leo and saw something she hadn't seen in him before. Hope. It was subtle, but it was there, a spark in his eyes that told her he was beginning to believe in the future they were creating together. Thank you, Leo, Evelyn said, her voice soft but sincere. Thank you for coming back, for believing in this project, for believing in us. Leo met her gaze, his expression serious but warm. Thank you, Evelyn, for giving me a second chance, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. It was a moment of understanding, of mutual respect, of a bond that had been forged through adversity and was now stronger than ever. With their new plans in place, Evelyn and Leo threw themselves into the final stages of the community center's construction. But just as they were beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, a new challenge arose. A powerful developer had taken an interest in the land where the community center was being built, and he wanted to buy it out. Evelyn received the news during a meeting with the city council. The developer had deep pockets and influential connections, and he was offering a hefty sum for the property. But Evelyn knew that selling the land would mean the end of the community center, and she wasn't about to let that happen. This project is too important, Evelyn argued, her voice firm as she addressed the council. It's not just a building, it's a lifeline for the people in this community. We can't let it be destroyed before it even has a chance to make a difference. The council members exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. The developer's offer was tempting, and they were under pressure to bring more revenue into the city. But Evelyn refused to back down. We've worked too hard to let this slip away, she continued, her voice rising with passion. This center is going to change lives. It's going to give people hope, dignity, and a chance to rebuild. We can't put a price on that. Leo, who had accompanied her to the meeting, stepped forward. I've seen what happens when people are left with nothing, he said, his voice steady. I was one of those people. This center, it's more than just a building. It's a symbol of what's possible when people come together to lift each other up. Please don't take that away. The room fell silent as the council members considered their words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the council leader spoke. We'll take your arguments into consideration, he said, his tone neutral. But we need time to deliberate. As they left the meeting, Evelyn felt a knot of tension in her stomach. They had done everything they could, but now, the fate of the community center was out of their hands. We did our best, Leo said quietly as they walked back to the construction site. Whatever happens, we know we fought for what's right. Evelyn nodded, though her heart was heavy with uncertainty. I just hope it's enough. Back at the site, the workers continued their tasks, unaware of the potential threat to their efforts. Evelyn and Leo watched them for a moment, both lost in thought. "We can't give up now," Evelyn said finally, her voice resolute. "We've come too far." "Agreed," Leo replied. "No matter what, we keep pushing forward." As they stood together, facing the challenges ahead, Evelyn realized that this was the final test of their partnership. They had weathered betrayals, setbacks, and doubts. But now, they had to stand united in the face of this new obstacle. The final push had begun, and they were ready to fight for the future they had worked so hard to build. Together. The air buzzed with anticipation as people began to gather outside the community center, a sense of solidarity and determination palpable among them. Word had spread quickly after the city council meeting, and the residents of the surrounding neighborhoods had come together to show their support for the project. Evelyn Carlisle and Leo Tanner stood at the forefront, looking out over the growing crowd with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Evelyn glanced at Leo, who was scanning the crowd, his expression serious but calm. "I didn't expect so many people to show up," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Leo nodded, his eyes finally meeting hers. "People need this, Evelyn. They need hope, and they need to know that someone is fighting for them." Evelyn smiled, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. "I'm glad we didn't give up." The crowd continued to grow, and soon, the sound of voices filled the air as people began to share their stories. Stories of struggle, of survival, of dreams that had been deferred but never forgotten. Many spoke about what the community center would mean to them, how it would give them a chance to rebuild their lives and offer their children a brighter future. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the scene, Evelyn stepped forward to address the crowd. She felt a surge of nerves but pushed them aside, knowing that this moment was too important to let fear hold her back. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice strong and clear. "This community center is more than just a building. It's a beacon of hope for everyone who has ever felt lost, for everyone who has ever struggled to find their place in the world. We've come a long way, but there are still challenges ahead. That's why we need your support, now more than ever." The crowd responded with cheers and applause, their energy lifting Evelyn's spirits. She felt a deep connection to these people, a shared sense of purpose that transcended their differences. Leo stepped forward next, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "This center isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's about the lives we can change, the futures we can build together. But we can't do it alone. We need each and every one of you to stand with us, to show the city council that this community is worth fighting for." More cheers erupted from the crowd, and Evelyn felt a swell of emotion. For the first time since the project began, she truly believed that they could succeed, not just in building the center, but in creating something that would endure, something that would make a real difference. As the meeting drew to a close, Evelyn and Leo mingled with the crowd, listening to people's stories and answering their questions. The support they received was overwhelming, and by the end of the evening, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of hope. "We did it," she whispered to Leo as they watched the last of the crowd disperse. "We did," Leo agreed, a rare smile playing on his lips. "But the real fight is just beginning." A few weeks later, the day finally arrived, the grand opening of the community center. The once empty lot had been transformed into a welcoming space, with bright, airy rooms, comfortable furniture, and walls adorned with artwork created by local residents. The center was a testament to the hard work and dedication of everyone involved, and it was finally ready to open its doors to the public. Evelyn stood at the entrance, greeting the first visitors as they arrived. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a feeling that something important was happening. She watched as families, children, and individuals from all walks of life entered the building, their faces lighting up with smiles as they explored the new space. Leo stood nearby, his eyes taking in the scene with quiet satisfaction. He had poured his heart and soul into the design, and seeing it come to life was a moment of profound fulfillment. "Leo," Evelyn called to him, motioning for him to join her. "It's time." Together, they walked to the front of the main hall, where a small stage had been set up for the opening ceremony. The room was filled with people, supporters, volunteers, city officials, and members of the community, each of them eager to witness this milestone. Evelyn stepped up to the microphone, taking a moment to compose herself before she began. "Welcome, everyone," she said, her voice resonating through the room. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this community. This center is more than just a place. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together, when we believe in each other, and when we refuse to give up on our dreams." The audience responded with applause, their enthusiasm palpable. This project would not have been possible without the support of so many people. Evelyn continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But there is one person in particular who deserves special recognition. Leo Tanner, your vision, your dedication, and your resilience have been the driving force behind this center. We wouldn't be here today without you." The crowd erupted in applause as Leo stepped forward, his expression one of humility and gratitude. He took the microphone from Evelyn, pausing for a moment as the room quieted. "Thank you, Evelyn," he began, his voice steady. "But this center isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Every person who believed in this project, who contributed their time, their resources, and their passion. This center is for the community, by the community, and it belongs to all of us." More applause followed, and Leo felt a deep sense of connection to the people in the room. He had spent so much of his life feeling isolated, disconnected from the world around him. But here, in this moment, he felt a part of something bigger, something meaningful. As the ceremony concluded, Evelyn and Leo cut the ribbon, officially opening the community center to the public. The room filled with cheers, and people began to explore the center, eager to see all that it had to offer. Evelyn stood back, watching as the community center came to life. She felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for herself, but for everyone who had played a part in making this dream a reality. "We did it," she whispered to herself, a smile spreading across her face. Later that afternoon, after the excitement of the opening had begun to settle, Evelyn and Leo retreated to the garden behind the community center. It was a peaceful space, with benches nestled among flowers and trees, providing a quiet refuge for reflection. They sat together on one of the benches, the events of the day still fresh in their minds. For a while, they simply enjoyed the serenity of the garden, letting the reality of their achievements sink in. "This place turned out better than I ever imagined," Leo said finally, breaking the silence. "It's everything we hoped for, and more." Evelyn nodded, her gaze drifting over the garden. "It really is. And it's just the beginning, Leo. There's so much more we can do." "I know," Leo replied, his tone thoughtful. "But I think we should take a moment to appreciate what we've accomplished so far. We've come a long way from where we started." Evelyn smiled, a sense of pride filling her. "We have, and it hasn't been easy. There were times when I wasn't sure we'd make it." Leo turned to her, his expression serious but kind. "But we did, because we didn't give up. On the project, on each other, or on ourselves." Evelyn looked into his eyes, seeing the truth in his words. They had faced so many challenges, both external and internal, but they had emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. "Thank you, Leo," she said softly, "for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "And I couldn't have done it without you," Leo replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "You gave me a second chance, Evelyn. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. For that, I'll always be grateful." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their journey settling between them. It had been a long and difficult road, but they had made it to the other side, and now they were ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Evelyn and Leo returned to the community center. The building was quiet now, the day's events having come to a close. But even in the stillness, there was a sense of life, of potential, of a future that was just beginning. They stood at the entrance, looking out over the center they had built together. It was more than just a structure. It was a testament to their resilience, their partnership, and their belief in the power of community. "What's next?" Leo asked, his voice filled with quiet determination. Evelyn smiled, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "We keep building. We expand the programs, reach more people, bring in more resources. This is just the beginning, Leo. There's so much more we can do. Leo nodded, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. I'm ready, he said simply. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. They stood there for a moment longer, side by side, gazing out at the community center that had become the heart of their shared journey. The future was uncertain, but it was also filled with possibilities that they were ready to embrace, together. As they turned to leave, walking side by side into the night, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her purpose, her place in the world, and she knew that with Leo by her side, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. Together, she whispered, more to herself than to Leo. Together, he echoed, a smile in his voice. And with that, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever the future might bring, with the echoes of their journey guiding them toward a new and hopeful dawn.